Welcome. I'm Sister Who. The first church I really remember going to was a big yellow brick Catholic church. A fairly modern design, not really modern, but not. Well, for those of you who are unaware of it, in the 1960s there was something called the Second Vatican Council, which was this big church meeting where they rewrote all kinds of stuff and changed rules, and essentially went from the most obvious thing being that the church service went from being said in Latin to being said in English or whatever the language of the people in the particular part of the world was. Well, most of my experience came in right after that, and so in going through Catholic school, the nuns I knew weren't wearing black and white habits anymore. But even with that, there was always this understanding that a nun wasn't really a woman. A nun was a nun and a priest was a priest, and then you also had men and women, and they were like mom and dad. But that's where my ideas about God began, and I'm grateful that the first ideas I received were very inclusive, open, affirming ideas. The nuns were people that I respected very highly. Very, very dedicated people. Obviously, this is not what they would have preferred that I grow up to become. This is more a combination of the seeds and the essences, the initial ideas they instilled in me, and my own creativity that emerged over the years. But I remember when I was 6 or 7, being read this book about a little boy going to church, and at the end of the book, he's leaving the church and he's waving as he looks back inside and saying something like, "Goodbye, God, I'll see you next Sunday." And my mother wanted to be sure I understood that it wasn't that God lived only within the church, like you leave God behind when you walk out of the church, but there was a sense in which the church was considered to be God's house. I think what I understood early, the real point of the church was to facilitate divine connection, to be a place where there was a distinction between that which was sacred and that which was not. Whether you go to pre-Christian tribal societies or anything that's occurred within the wide range of Christianity or other modern situations, any time there's been a civilization that had any sense of religion, there's always the sense of something being sacred and something being not sacred or profane, not in the sense of profanity or evil, but just in the sense that it wasn't sacred. Things that were set aside to facilitate divine connection, divine service. Priestly robes, certain candles, holy water, water that had essentially gone through some sort of blessing ritual and was now designated as to be used only for ritual purposes. And I think, when people talk about the relevancy of church, I guess the thing that I come back to is the real task of any church, of any religious system, is to bring a sense of the sacredness into life, a sense of something that's transcendent, something that's beyond what we see. Whether you want to think of it as a person called God, or as the collective unconsciousness of the human race, or some higher order that we don't understand, but that might be scientific in nature. To me, it all comes down to about the same thing. It's something demands a very different kind of respect, something that involves that part of ourselves that we might call a soul or a spirit, something that isn't measurable, but that it's very, very important that it be there. To me, it was also very important that it be something undefinable, because if I could define it, if I could say this is what God is, then automatically there's something that God is not. And if I say this is where God is, then there's some place where God is not. And I needed God to be bigger than that. I needed God to be able to deal with any situation that could possibly occur in my life. Everything from dressing up in disface and costume and still wanting to be absolutely honest in terms of sharing what's in my heart and what's within my soul, to something that can encompass living in a city where people really don't want to include something like this because they would prefer a God who stayed in a little box, a God that fit a definition, a God that didn't get out of control and bring something into life that was completely unexpected, completely unforeseen, and in that unfamiliarity, something that was threatening. And yet, throughout the Bible, when people come face to face with God, or even one of God's representatives, just an angel, they're terrified because suddenly they're confronting something so powerful that it is completely beyond their control and completely beyond being limited by their theology. Even the Pharisees would come up to Jesus and say, "The Scriptures say this," and he would say, "Yes, and he would proceed to go on to name something or to interpret the Scriptures in such a way that was beyond their control and not at all consistent with the Scripture with which he'd been presented. Not at all at odds with the Scripture with which he'd been presented. He would take the Scripture that they'd presented and he would tell them what it really meant. And something in their minds would go, "Oh, he's right," and they couldn't argue. And it was very frustrating to them to have someone like Jesus walking around loose who was really beyond their control. But there's a sense in which we're all created in God's image, and part of that image is that none of us is really under anybody else's control. There's manipulations that goes on, there's even abuse, but there's always this inner spark of God within the person that defies control. Parents who want their kids to grow up a certain way, and the kid suddenly becomes interested in something else over there, and the parent doesn't know what to do. Or a parent who does everything right for the kid, and somehow, as a teenager, the person finds there are unresolved things within them, and they begin acting out in different ways that are not helpful. But what they're really trying to find is an answer to something they feel inside that maybe they can't even put a name on it, but they feel it. And because they feel it, they feel they have to respond to it, and they have to act upon it, and they have to do something to try to resolve what they feel. There's always this unpredictability within humanity, even within ourselves. So we go along and think that we like such and such, and so we include that in our lives for a while and go along, and after a while it suddenly doesn't feel right anymore. Like a pair of shoes that's worn out, or a shirt that's been outgrown and starts to fit too tightly. And we find that there is an element within ourselves that is beyond our control. And so for myself, I choose to look for the greater harmony and to understand that because God exists, there is the possibility of greater harmony, and there is a way that every single incongruous or seemingly incongruous thing really can fit in. A way that Sister Who can go to a farming community, to a place where the population really hasn't had anything like Sister Who around before. And even in that situation, there's something I can give and there's something I can learn. And there's a way that we can interact and mutually empower each other, help to make each other wiser and stronger than we've been, help to make each other more sensitive than we've been. 100 years ago, there were groups of people that supposedly didn't count. And I'm thankful that we're learning, that we're getting to a place where we understand how everybody really does count and what everybody really does have to give. And in understanding that, we become wiser. We become capable of all sorts of things that we couldn't have understood before. In talking with a person who's blind, we begin to understand what it's like not to live every day of your life being able to see what's in front of you. What it's like to be confronted with a situation in which you have to interpret from only sounds the shape of a room, the number of people in the room, the speed of traffic going by, all sorts of things that most of us interpret through our eyes and nothing else. What happens if we get in an accident and lose our eyes? We're cleaning something, for example, and a bit of bleach splashes off the floor into our eyes and we're blinded. The damage is done before it can be stopped. And suddenly, all of life changes. That's something a friend of mine who's blind mentioned once, that there are various minorities, and at some point in time, everyone has been part of some minority. I mean, every conceivable group of humanity has been persecuted or oppressed or excluded in some way at some point in time. But people with disabilities, it's a minority that everyone is a candidate for. Anyone can have an accident that they haven't foreseen and have to spend the rest of their life blind. Or a friend of mine who was in a very bad motorcycle accident and is now spending the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Suddenly everything changes, and you have to draw on senses and abilities and ways of interacting that that before were just peripheral little trivial things you took for granted. The fact that you can smell something. For a blind person, it's very important to smell. If you have a gas leak, how else will they know that it's dangerous to be in that room if they can't smell the gas? Most of us, though, I would bet, go through life not really paying attention to it. It's kind of there and we notice it, but it's not really important. And then at any point in time something might happen and suddenly it's very important. And we wonder why we took it for granted so long. In all of this, in all of the confusing, challenging, perplexing things, paradoxes that I've had to face, sometimes, even when it doesn't make any sense to me, I still find this abiding sense that for me, God is a person. And whether God reveals God's self to someone else that way or not is between God and that person. For me, God is a person, though. But I need God to be a transcendent person. I need God to be more than my understandings, my limited understandings of what a man is, of what a woman is, of what a person is, of what a benevolent force is. How can I, with merely a human perspective, really claim to know what's truly good and bad in any situation anyway? But in having this person that I call God within my understanding, I find in that a liberty and a place and a space that even in the most unaccepting community, I know this is some place I belong, this space with God, and I know it's a space in which all the beautiful things of which I can conceive, all those things can be expressed and shared, even if it's just me sharing it with God. Even if no one else is there, to use the saying, even if the tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, if I'm there and God is there, I can appreciate the beauty of the sound. I can appreciate the beauty of the gift, whatever its description. I'd like to share a song with you now. It's one I wrote, I think it was a couple years ago. Kind of speaking of all these different things and just giving a sound to the words, a melody to the music, a melody within the music, a melody of music. I'm not always sure the best way of saying things, but there are times when I'm blessed with a moment of harmony, and I find that I'm able to be the vehicle, or be the scribe, be the musician for a song, and I suppose I could say, well, I wrote it. Well, did it really come from me, or was it a gift to me? And then again, there's the verse in the Bible that says, what do you have that you did not receive? Everything is a gift. The only, and King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. So I guess anything I come up with is a combination of other things that have already existed. just given a new form and hopefully a fresh color. Anyway, I find the most wonderful, beautiful thing within each person, within myself and within everyone I meet, if I'm able to connect with it. The most wonderful thing is that spark of God that lives within each. Yellow bricks and steeple high contain the worship space. At other times I met with God in a wild and wooded place. But the home that God likes most of all, I knew right from the start. Travels with each one everywhere, the cathedral of the heart. There the music rolls like thunder, with rainbows all around. And God and I together are all that can be found. A healing light that fills the place as our dance goes on and on. The cathedral of my heart is where my love lets me sing my song. From time to time I build a space with candle, cup and sphere, crosses, stars and painted things that cannot bring God near. But the call that brings that sacred one more quickly than I know is when with openness and honesty my cathedral spirit shows. There the music rolls like thunder, with rainbows all around. And God and I together are all that can be found. A healing light that fills the place as our dance goes on and on. The cathedral of my heart is where love lets me sing my song. The cathedral of my heart is where love lets me sing my song. I recall hearing someone describe once their vision of returning to heaven after living life on earth, and wondering what the first question from God would be, and suggesting that he thought it would be, did you sing your own song? Did you sing your own song? Or did you spend your entire life mimicking the words and phrases and melodies of others? Did you give the gift that was uniquely yours to give? The perspective that no one else could see? The understanding that everyone else missed? And maybe there were hundreds, even thousands of people around you who were sure they knew exactly how everyone should be, how you should act, how you should dress, how you should live, what church you should go to, which books you should read, what movies you should look at. Maybe they thought they knew, and maybe they did and maybe they didn't. Maybe they had all the best intentions. But the life you were given to lead was your own, not somebody else's. Maybe somebody wanted you to be a doctor, or someone wanted you to be a housewife, or someone wanted you to play this or that instrument. What instrument did your heart, what instrument did the spark of God within you want to play? Maybe someone, I would say foolishly, told you you couldn't sing. Did you stop singing? maybe someone told you you weren't very eloquent for praying in public, and thus you probably shouldn't lead the church in an opening prayer to a specific service. Did you stop praying just because they said that? What people say to me, what people say to any one of us, reflects themselves more than the thing about which they are speaking. Jesus said, out of the heart the mouth speaks. What somebody says about me shows their perception of me, their understanding of me, their opinion of me. It cannot show the truth of me. I try to come up with the words to convey insights and understandings and perspectives and ways of being. And I struggle with this symbolic effort. Every sound I make, every word I choose is a symbol of something I understand inwardly. And I hope that I'm choosing the right sounds and the right words, the right phrases, the right gestures to communicate this inner reality to someone else so that they understand it in the same way that I understand it. I'm not sure that always happens. With any phrase I ever say, I can make any statement, and the possible messages go on and on and on. There's the thing I meant to say, the thing I actually said, the thing I thought I said, the thing you heard, the thing you thought I meant, the thing you would have preferred I said that sits better with your understanding of things and is perhaps a little less challenging. There's only one verbal statement at the middle of all those guesses. Communication is a very arbitrary, subjective thing. Still, it's all we have, so we have to do our best to try to see who the real person is behind the face, to try to understand all the things that haven't been said. And to the extent that we don't know or don't understand, to give that person the space in which to either hold private or reveal as much or as little as they want. We can tentatively interact with our understandings, but they need to be tentative, not firm judgments that place the person in a box and let them do nothing else. The person who we didn't know was a very good pianist. To not have a music service and ask everyone who plays an instrument to participate, and then look at that person and say, oh, well, I know you don't play anything. Well, we wouldn't know that. Perhaps they do play an instrument and we've just never asked. Perhaps they have something to offer that we've never discovered. There's an openness to the universe and an openness to life, that it can go in a myriad of directions, in a myriad of different ways, toward a myriad of understandings. Always something more, never a last word on anything. In the same way, our understanding of each other needs to be open-ended. We need to give each other space in which to grow, new things to discover, new ways to dress, new ways to sing, new ways to talk, new subjects to address. I don't know how many more shows we'll be making. We could go on for years as far as I'm concerned. I could hope that we do. I don't know what subjects we'll get to in that time. In the past, I've done a huge range of shows, talked about a huge range of topics. But I know there are a lot of topics with specific people that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to because we just ran out of time. To end on perhaps a more personal note, just very briefly, I would really wish that I had a very close relationship with people in my family, but my expression, my creativity, and even just the fact that I'm gay is not something that sits well with them. And so I try to respect where they're coming from, that they don't wish to include these aspects of who I am in their life. And in the end, there's not a whole lot of me that I can include in their lives, and so I don't have a lot of interaction with my parents anymore. It's their choice to have a relationship with me or to not. But as with TV shows, as with relationships, part of what defines us as human beings is that life is finite. Life within this world is finite. Our time on earth is finite. It's limited. It has a start and it will have an end. And there won't always be time. And the day that or the time that we say, oh, they know I love them, I'll tell them tomorrow. Or maybe I don't need to tell them. Or the joke I heard once of the gentleman who, the gentleman and his wife who went to hear some speaker talk, and the speaker said, you have to tell your wife that you love her. And he responded, I told her 25 years ago when we got married. If I changed my mind, I would be sure and let her know. And it was amusing, but you need to tell people. And when you choose to do nothing, it's like saying the relationship we have is good enough. And if my parents are content with not having a relationship with their gay son, I can deal with that. If they want a relationship with me, though, they need to understand, and I need to understand, that we don't have forever. Time doesn't go on forever. We have a limited amount of time to say what we will say, and then it's gone. I may get killed in an accident, they may die, anything could happen. If you don't like the way things are now, even if it's a little thing, even if it's a letter, even if it's a thought, even if it's just a prayer, do something. Don't let it sit the way it is, whatever it is, if you don't like it. Be considerate of others, be kind, be loving, but to act is also a kind and loving thing, to say that I need to speak up today because I don't know if I'll have tomorrow. I need to let someone know that I appreciate them today because I don't know if they'll be here tomorrow. In any case, I hope I'll be here next week, and I hope that you'll join me. Thank you.